My name's Rafael, you're watching Rock and Roll Garage, and I'm going to show you 5 progressive rock bands that the Jethro Tull leader, Ian Anderson, said he likes. But first, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. Well, we selected 5 prog rock bands that Ian Anderson praised over the years, and the first one is Pink Floyd. That's right, he likes Pink Floyd, and especially the first album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, released in 1967, which is, for many people, including Ian Anderson, one of the first really progressive rock albums, an album that was fundamental to the evolution of progressive rock, to the birth of that kind of music. And he even, in an interview with Classic Rock back in 2021, he listed 10 albums that changed his life, and one of them was The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. And this is what he said. There were 2 seminal albums in 1967 that carved the path for people like me in the progressive pop contest. One was the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper, of course. The other was an altogether more surreal and proggy affair, Pink Floyd's Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Both albums took elements from lots of different sources and used them in colorful, creative ways. For me, the Pink Floyd album had more meaning. The Beatles were a pop group, so I thought their stuff was a bit contrived, a bit twee. I liked the singer-songwriter element to Floyd more. Syd Barrett's songs were strange and funny. They perfectly complemented the radical, druggy, instrumental stuff the band did. You saw pictures and presented them with words and sound rather than as paintings. That's what Ian Anderson said about that first Pink Floyd album. And the interesting thing is that he was part of a Pink Floyd tribute album, which was Back Against the Wall, released in 2005, which paid a tribute to the classic album The Wall, released in 1979 by the band. And he covered the track The Thin Ice on that album. The second band that we selected is The Nice. The Nice was a band in which the late legendary keyboardist Keith Emerson was a member of, before Emerson, Lake and Palmer. The band was a short-lived group. It was active from 1967 to 1970, and they were united in 2002. They only released 3 studio albums in the late 60s, which were The Thoughts of Emerson Dave Jack in 1968, Ars Longa Vita Brevis in 1968, and Nice in 1969. And Anderson was a big fan of Keith, and in an interview with Planet Rock in 2020, he listed 4 songs which were some of his favorites of all time. And one of them was America, which I think is the most famous song by The Nice. And this is what he said. The Nice were contemporaries of ours at the Marquee Club when we first got a residency there. They were quite well established at that point. Indeed, I was quite captivated not only by the showmanship of Keith Emerson, who obviously had some considerable chops as a jazz and classical pianist, but the band as a whole, Blinky Davison, the drummer, and Brian, singer and bass player. He was a bit of an unsung hero of The Nice. I always thought he had a certain charm. Plus, he was the only one that really communicated anything. The others were pretty much silent. And sadly, Keith Emerson decided to end his life back in 2016 at the age of 71. And Ian was really admired Emerson's music and his incredible ability and talent. And this is what he said about Keith's death at the time in a radio interview. He said, "I'm reasonably fortunate that at my age, I still have a certain amount of physical skill to incorporate the technique successfully on stage. So my hands have not yet frozen up. I don't have any injuries and any sort of industrial injuries from playing the flute, like a lot of flute players do get apparently. I'm in reasonably good shape, so I have not yet encountered that phase when things physically become very difficult to do. Unlike, of course, poor Keith Emerson, who we all know the last few days sadly seemed to have taken the decision to end it because of his frustration, I guess, of not being able to do what he used to be able to do. Indeed, when Emerson, Lake and Palmer toured with us in 1997, Keith was having a hard time. I mean, he said to me, I can only do 45 minutes at a stretch. Otherwise, my hand is so sore and then next day I can't play at all. He was suffering some of the nights on that tour. You could see he was in pain. That's a difficult thing. I mean, that was in 1997. Imagine how much worse it must have got since then. So I feel terrible for people who are losing that ability and perhaps almost frightened to get out there and do it because they know they can't deliver what they used to deliver. That's what Ian said about Keith. And the next one that we selected was King Crimson, which is another really, really important progressive rock group. And obviously they are known for their most famous song, which is 21st Century Schizoid Man. And in an interview with Planet Rock in 2020, Ian chose this song as one of his favorites of all time. And this is what he said. It sits very well next to The Nice, because at the time at the Marquee Club, King Crimson also begun to play that year, 1969, and released an album which had that track on it. These were poignant times. 21st Century Schizoid Man was one of the things that erupted at the stage of the Marquee Club and of the grooves of your vinyl LP. In a way that it had an angry, impassionate outpouring lyrically, in terms of guitar playing too. So it's a great track and remains one to this day. The band was formed in 1968 by Robert Fripp, who was the leader of the band through the decades. It also had Michael Giles, Greg Lake, which later on would be, would be the vocalist of many other groups, including Emerson, Lake and Palmer. He would be Keith Emerson's bandmate in that supergroup. It also had Ian MacDonald and the lyricist Peter Sinfield, and they remain to this day one of the most respected and influential progressive rock groups of all time. The next two ones that we selected, and we're going to talk about them together because in an interview, Ian mentioned it, both of them at the same time, and it is Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the supergroup formed by Keith Emerson, Greg Lake, and Carl Palmer. And yes, this incredible progressive rock group with John Anderson, Steve Hall, many other incredible incredible musicians, and the bass player Chris Cryer as well. And Ian praised the two groups in an interview with Vintage Rock back in 2002. And he said, this is what he said in an interview, with Something Else in 2014. He said, I personally think that the world is a better place for having Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and yes, because their music was quite elevated, great tunes and some innovative playing. But of course, it was too many people a bit excessive. I think some writers and some musicians found it pompous because they were displaying their technical skills as musicians, sometimes in a way that made them seem like party shows-offs. And this is what he said about Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and yes. And Anderson had the chance to tour with Emerson, Lake and Palmer, as you was able to see in what he said about when he talked about Keith Emerson, ELP tour with Jethro Tull in 1997. And these are the 5 progressive rock bands that he likes, and obviously Ian loves many other groups, many other progressive rock groups. in many other different groups. For example, we already did a video about his favorite punk rock bands. He loves punk rock too. He loves Motorhead. If you want to see that video of Ian praising punk rock, what he said about punk rock groups, you can go to description, visit the video, or click right here. And that's it. I hope you liked the video. Don't forget to subscribe, to like the video, leave your comment, tell me if you knew about these bands or not, about these things he said. And if you want to read more, much more about this, go to description and visit the article I wrote about it. And don't forget to visit rockandrollgarage.com. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.